Welcome to part 3 of 2016 FBR Ops Series. Today's session is Rising Tides, How Sharing Unit-Level Data System-Wide Benefits Everyone. We have another 3 great panelists with us today to share some insights and best practices. We have David Hicks, with the co-president of HomeVestors, Paul Pickett, the Chief Development Officer of Wild Birds Unlimited, and Jayson Pearl, the Executive Vice President of BrightStar Care. And welcome, panelists. And facilitating today's conversation, it's going to be FBR's President and COO, Michelle Rowan. So Michelle, let me hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you guys all for joining us today, and I am very excited for our panelists who I get to work with. So when you guys start speaking, I want you to do a quick little intro to who you are, how you are in your brand. And I think that you guys are all perfect because you bring different perspectives into this conversation. One being that, Jayson, you have been on the marketing side and then gone to operations. Paul, you are the most involved development titled person on the operations side that I know in the industry. And David, you're the co-president, so you're seeing both sides of the house. And I think as Mike shares the first data slide that we're going to show today, that you'll start seeing that in our data, these questions here that we're sharing show franchisees are supportive of the brand, franchisees are supportive of each other, and senior management promotes a team culture. And I think that you might have been expecting some numbers and financial related slides here, but I think that showing these data points, red being our top 20 brands versus the overall benchmark, so you can see they're outperforming it. These types of data points support the idea that you have to have an environment where the franchisees and franchisors feel good about sharing this type of information and get the value of it. So we're showing that here, that's coming across with the top brands that are in the data that you see here. And as we go in and have the conversation, I think that you'll see that having that operations and development or marketing side of your staff both honed in on this conversation and these metrics and these numbers, you'll start to understand how everyone kind of plays a part in it, supporting the brand and growing the brand. So I'm going to start with a poll question out to the audience so that you guys can answer as we start having our conversation. So as we start talking about collecting franchisee financials, our poll question for you is, which types of data do you collect from your franchisees? So you can check all that apply. And I'm going to start with you, Paul, if you want to start going through, well, do your quick introduction, but also then start going through the slides that you're sharing on today's call.
Okay. Well, I'm Paul Pickett. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Wild Birds Unlimited. I just celebrated my 27th year here with the Wild Birds Unlimited brand, and I'm in charge of, or my job responsibilities include leading the franchise development team. I have an incredible seasoned team that helps me there. I'm in charge of all the real estate and the legal, and then provide ongoing assistance to our incredible operations team that's led by Amy Moore, who's our Director of Retail Ops, and Pat Perkinson, our COO and Executive VP, and an incredible group of business coaches. So
Perfect.
We collect, oh, is that good? All right.
Yep, that was good.
Okay. And I am not in charge of my slides at this point, I don't think, or is that not true? Do I have it? Well, we'll see. I don't think so. So if someone could just change the slide. This is just a general cover.
Paul, try clicking now, see if you can control it.
Okay. Oh yeah, now I'm in control. Just where I like to be. Just kidding. We collect a lot of data from our franchisees. Monthly sales summary, which is a pushed out of our franchisees' point of sale system or uploaded for those few franchisees who don't have the point of sale system. Some of our older stores don't have it. We collect a monthly marketing activity report, which is an online survey that all of our franchisees are required to complete every month. That gives a very strong overview of the marketing activities that they participated in the previous month. so that we can then tie that back into the POS data and find out what is working, what isn't working. And we look at everything from, we're a retail concept, backyard bird feeding, retail specialty stores. I guess I should have said that earlier. But looking at the marketing activities that they participate in, we provide 3 campaigns per month, and within each campaign there are multiple media opportunities, including direct mail to their existing customers, emails, social media posts, and then content so that they can update their own individual websites. As I mentioned, a primary campaign, a secondary campaign, and then a tertiary campaign that goes out to primarily just the customers who participate in our customer loyalty program called Daily Savings Club. We also collect from the point of sale seed reports, and bird seed is the base of our business. That is the highest sales category, and it is the driver of our business. One of the things that we talk about in the development process is the way to make money by owning a Wild Birds Unlimited store is to sell lots of bird seed to lots of customers. And then we also collect annually financial statements, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, and then of course the supporting tax materials. Some of our franchisees, participate in a coaching model that is pretty intense, and they submit quarterly financial statements into their business coaches for analysis on a quarterly basis. And all of our new stores work with our incredible new owner coach team, and they submit 30, 60, and 90-day financials in the beginning, and then on an as-needed basis throughout the year.
Great, that's a lot of data.
Okay.
I like it.
It is a lot of data. So kind of the timeline, monthly sales summaries, we've always collected those since 1983 when we began franchising. Annual, I apologize if there's any typos in this, but I don't think so. Well, annual financial statements using our standard chart of accounts since 1998. Monthly marketing activity reports since 2006, and seed reports since 2006. It's still not a mandate in our system, but the benefit of the data that our franchisees receive back from the analysis has motivated most of them actually to submit these seed reports so that we can use that data for comps and benchmarking purposes. A long time ago, I think I've got the date here, I gave a presentation at our annual conference about really getting serious about all of this data collection. And I introduced the presentation from a main stage with the quote from Peter Drucker that innovation is not just creativity, it's also discipline, really meaning and speaking to the point that you've got to have consistent data collection and consistent analysis. It's not just in order for us to identify where the opportunities for improvement are. So really, in order for us to change the metrics of our brand and to grow our individual franchisees' productivity, we had to get everyone on the same page in a disciplined fashion. So we talked about the fact that our data was now going to be required to be timely, consistent, and accurate. No special spreadsheets that franchisees were sending in. Everything had to be consistent, and we put timelines on it, and then actually over time rolled it into our agreements when that data was expected and required to be submitted. And we made a commitment. We made a commitment for it to be easier for our franchisees to submit the data. I think the marketing activity report's a good example. It used to be this quarterly, big, gigantic, long spreadsheet, and now we went to a very easy-to-use online survey tool. Had to come in the same format, so it was easier for us to analyze, and then easier for us to turn it around and put it back in the hands of the franchisees for them to use to make good business decisions in a way with additional tools to make it easy to implement those decisions.
Great. And Paul, how many franchisees do you have open and operating right now?
299.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I know. just dying for that next door to get open. So when we introduced this, we were probably 250. No, not even that high. I can't. I honestly, I couldn't pull that number out of my head. But so, I mean, basically, this next slide is just when we tell you what we need, you submit it in a consistent format. We analyze the data to develop effective strategies and communicate them, and then those strategies are implemented upon. We're all going to win. So that was the end result. I honestly was scared to death to give this presentation to the franchisees because it really did sort of move the dial on the culture of saying, you know, everyone's friendly, just give us what we want and we'll help you as we can, to saying, we got to take this serious, guys. We're no longer playing store. We've got to really build these businesses and try to help you develop a business enterprise that is going to have a return on investment both while you're owning and operating it and when you go to retire and sell it. So we, I've got this list. I don't think it's helpful to just read all of this list. The one thing that I didn't mention earlier, we do collect and now we require, we use mystery shops as a tool to ensure that our franchisees are delivering the exceptional customer experience that we teach, train, and motivate towards. And then I added on the bottom our franchise business review survey. We actually take that data very seriously. We analyze it. We break it down by business coach, by region, and we use it as an internal KPI, and it's on our annual performance reviews internally here at the Franchise Support Center. So we have expectations for satisfaction levels from our franchisees and work towards that.
Great. Good. So I don't know, Mike, do you want to pop up the poll results so people can see those, and then, or will that break the slides that Paul's on? I don't know if you can show both or not.
Yeah, I think I can show it, but I don't know if Paul will be able to just finish his slide there. Can you? Okay, the results should be up now.
Yep, perfect. So I just wanted people to get a sense of everyone that's on the call, what you guys are collecting from your franchisees currently, and then you can jump back into the slide of your FDD information that you're sharing.
Okay. So you want me to go back to this one?
Yes,
okay.
Perfect. Well done.
And then, thank you. The last thing I wanted to share is, of course, I am Chief Development Officer, so taking this information, having it, having these benchmarks allows me in the development of item 19, the financial performance representation section of our FDD, is to create an FDD that really gives a very clear picture about our franchise system, so that when prospective candidates are analyzing whether or not this is a good match, and of course that's from both sides of the table, they have realistic expectations of what can be accomplished. And so we have I would call it an intense item 19. Our attorneys have said, hold on, put on the brakes, you're done. You can't, it can't be any bigger or any longer. And we provide 3 years average, median, range of sales. We break it down by age group. We give a first running 12 months of sales, and then actually have just added a second running 12 months of sale, a monthly contribution to the total so that our franchise candidates can do cash flow projections using some real numbers, and then provide system-wide information on some of the key expense items such as cost of goods sold, first-year marketing and wages details, and then we provide owner's discretionary cash flow for this whole system and then break it down by the first 3 years. And then very importantly, we provide information about the Daily Savings Club, which is our customer loyalty program, so that our franchise candidates can get a pretty good idea of the value of that program and identify honestly, how many Daily Savings Club customers they're going to need in order to hit their sales and profit goals. So all of this is really hitting both the top, the bottom line, and the customer loyalty information. We've always had a very expansive item 19. I just think it's really important to provide the real story so that your candidates aren't guessing, and it has helped us, I think, immensely. One of the things I'm most proud of in all of these years of franchising, we've never had any litigation, and I think part of it is because the expectations have been set in the beginning of the relationship with the franchise candidate.
That's true. And anyone that knows Paul or has met him in person knows that he carries around his FDD and loves to share it with anyone. So if you want to see a copy of his FDD, I'm sure he will share it with you.
Thanks, Michelle. You carry a purse, I carry a FDD.
That's right. You carry your FDD. So David, I want to go to you next. And again, I want you to kind of explain a little bit about your background, but I want to ask what types of unit level data that you collect with the franchisees, and also too, when you came into the system, it was already an established system with franchisees. So I'm wondering what was being collected, or what changed when you came on board.
Absolutely. And I'm David Hicks. I'm co-president of HomeVestors. You may not have heard of HomeVestors, but you've seen our billboards probably. You see the billboards. We buy ugly houses. That's us. We're in 44 states, in 120 different cities across the country. So we are growing fairly substantially right now. Previously, we do not do an item 19. Our business is a little bit different because we're buying houses. So we don't have a lot of little transactions. We've got fewer big transactions. So it's kind of a unique and different than probably most of you on the call. But it also, the financials, we do not collect financials. We do, in fact, we've had in the past real efforts trying to get financials, but they were almost worthless because what franchises do with their equity in the business, many of our franchises are in the business trying to create wealth, and they roll much of their profit back into rental properties and future income that shows little profit now. Some of them show big profit now. So it's a wide variety that makes the financial statements, and also many of them take move them into other businesses to hold rental properties, and that asset doesn't even show up on the franchise. So that becomes a real challenge to us. So we have gone to where we collect and share with our franchise a great deal of data based on performance. And we can go that. I don't know if you want me to proceed, show some of the stats that I have there. Do you have those slides?
Yes, we are going to hold that, though, until we have the next topic that we're going to talk about is how do you share it. So I think we're going to have you share the slides then, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Perfect. So do you, and I'm going to ask Paul this too, but do you have a particular person on your team that's responsible with collecting all the unit level data that you're collecting? Because it sounds like you're in a little bit of a trickier situation.
Well, most of our unit level data is collected automatically based on our reports and transactions. That literally is done by our IT department, and all of it is automatically. Everybody can see, within minutes when they report a transaction, what they bought, how much they paid for it. When they sell a house, they can tell the sales price of it. Within a market, everybody can see how many leads they've gotten so far today, and how many, all the data is almost real time.
Okay, excellent. Good. So then, Jayson, I want to finish the first question with you then. So what types of unit level data are you collecting? And again, if you can just give a little brief synopsis, and especially the hop you made from one side of your team to the other as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jayson Pearl. I'm the EVP of Operations for BrightStar Care. We're a home care and medical staffing franchisor. We have agencies in 38 states, 310 locations, and we've been franchising for about 11 years now. I started 8 years ago in a marketing and kind of training role, and moved over about a year and a half ago from Chief Marketing Officer to this new role over operations. And so in the role today, I'm over our field support team, our onboarding and training department, and our national accounts team. I guess like probably more closely like Paul, we collect virtually all types of data. One of the things that's unique about our business, at least in the home care space, is that we've created and operate and enhance the back office technology that runs our franchisees use to run their operation. So just by the nature of that, we're tracking really all of the data as it relates to customer and employee workflows, as well as the financial information from the third-party platforms that plug into it, such as the financial system, payroll, etc. We do have a pretty robust Item 19, one of the most robust in our industry, that includes a unit level profitability and revenue, service mix of business, national account revenue, and a lot of other key metrics.
Perfect. So the next slide, we're going to talk about sharing the data. So I'm going to start again with the poll question so that we can all continue talking as the audience answers. But so the question is, how often do you share unit level data with your franchisees? So I'm going to ask each of our panelists the question of what and how you share it with your system. And I think that just from kind of the conversation that Paul started, and I know that Jayson's doing as well, is I think that it's important to talk about how you're sharing it with your franchisees, but also beyond what's being presented in the FDD, how are you sharing that information with candidates as well, and what does it mean to that development process? So Jayson, I want to start back with you to talk about what data you're sharing, how you're sharing it. You kind of touched on that a little bit, but how frequently are you sharing it, or how do your franchisees have access to it, and then also on the candidate side?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Michelle. The way that we share it is probably two specific ways. One is what franchisees get individually based on their own performance and kind of benchmarks compared to the rest of the system. So on a weekly basis, they have access to updated indicators. In addition to being able to go and look at that dashboard, we create a push report that they get on a weekly basis that includes, again, kind of the exception basis relative to those key performance indicators on system-wide kind of metrics, but also their individual enterprise goals. So they are able to see that on an individual basis. Also on a weekly basis, we publish what we call the weekly ranking report, which includes in descending order, the top revenue by franchise location across our entire system, as well as a lot of other metrics such as gross margin, bill rates, pay rates, national account volume, and a lot of other data points. And I remember, and we've really been doing that since the beginning. I remember when I started 8 years ago, I was pretty surprised, quite frankly, that that was published in a weekly newsletter, and that there was a top 10 list of individual locations, total multi-unit enterprise, the top 10 list, as well as top 10 year-over-year growth. And what's been powerful about that is it really is sort of a normalizer for what's really happening across the system, and it empowers franchisees with the ability to reach out to to other franchisees for information based on those metrics. So they don't have to call up the IT department and get a report run, or rely on their field support person to bring them information. They've got access to that, and so they can look at how did somebody that's a similar number of years in business get to number 8 on the list this week, when that's they have a similar opportunity for success that I did. Or they can look at somebody that is a neighbor of theirs in the state with a similar business mix. How do they have a 2-point higher gross margin? Those types of things that they can just reach out to their peers at an annual conference, or pick up the phone, or see them at a regional meeting, which is really powerful. And I guess the other, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
No, I was just going to say, so what I really like is that just the sharing of the data is really, it's promoting collaboration between the franchisees and conversations that they might not otherwise have or know to have. You know, I think that it's very easy for who's perceived to be your top franchisees to be your loud franchisees, whereas
Yes.
this is relying on that data point to show, you know, this person is doing something that I'm not doing, so I'm just going to pick up the phone and talk with them. So I love that.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, and on the other part of your question, we talk about that very early on, including, you know, the early part of the discovery phase of kind of the franchise development process. So, you know, one of the presentations I do for new candidates is sort of around, you know, our take on, you know, how we purport to add the most value from a unit economics perspective, and one of the legs of that stool is benchmarking. So we talk about, you know, what I just, you know, shared today, just now about the weekly ranking report as sort of, you know, part of our culture and part of, you know, a team of, you know, of high performance and entrepreneurial spirit. And so that's, you know, that's part of who we are. That might not be right for everyone to have that kind of transparency and, you know, the accountability that comes along with that, and collaboration, helping others. But it helps us very early on establish if a candidate is a right fit for us, kind of based on their reaction to that. Because if you know, that's one of you know, our expectations, and really part of our DNA is the transparency and sharing, and how that helps the brand be successful, but franchisees being able to help their peers. So we share that really early on, and because of that, it's not a surprise when franchisees, you know, see that, you know, their revenue is put up there along with everyone else's, but because there's a culture of celebrating that and just having it be transparent, they see it in a real positive light.
Great. So Mike threw up the poll results, which is great. And I will say that I remember the first time that, and I don't know if it was part of our first operation series that we did or if it was another webinar we were doing, but I remember the first time doing this, and the not sharing unit level data with franchisees was well over 50%. So I would say in the last 5 years, there's definitely been a shift in how much is being shared with the franchisees. And without a doubt, there's been a shift in the amount that's being shared with a candidate before they ever even get in the doors. The number of FDDs I've reviewed that go down to the store level is pretty amazing. So it's, you know, making sure that you utilize that data that you're collecting. So Paul, we'll go to you, because then I'm going to have David do his slide. So Paul, you talked a little bit about what you share in your system, but how about how you're sharing it, or when, you know, how frequently are you sharing it with your franchisees? How do they access it? How are they reviewing it? And then also on the candidate side.
Perfect. Jayson made a couple of really excellent points. One about creating these reports and listings of the top performers, whether it's most improved, top sales, average ticket for us, number of transactions. We share that with our franchisees on a monthly basis, and then along with all of the key benchmarks and metrics, and break it down by region of the country. It does really promote a system of collaboration from franchisee to franchisee, in addition to coach to franchisee. And I think it inspires competition in a friendly sort of fashion, and it inspires people to constantly be growing their business and to see what the opportunity is, especially for franchisees who are a little bit older, who can see another store that is that same age, you know, 20 years, 25 years, and they're having this gigantic growth phase, and they do reach out and speak to each other. So we do a lot of the sales metrics on a monthly basis, although we do a mid-month report that is provided to all our franchisees, and then the individual coaches can send out what we call our stat summary out to their the group of franchisees that they're coaching individually. The marketing survey is collected on a monthly basis, so that information is compiled, and then a report is written and published. And it lives on our intranet system, so franchisees can get to it at any time. It's not live data like 100% of the time. I wish it was, but that's not quite within our bandwidth at this point. Financial statement data is only collected annually officially, although we do have one of our coaching models is called the enterprise coaching, and it's voluntary. Our franchisees really commit to an intense level of coaching, but then they're sharing a lot of, and not all data, but they're sharing individual data that's listed by store. So you're not just seeing like, here are the top sales and here's the list, but without the numbers. In this enterprise coaching model, those individual franchisees have committed to being 100% transparent in the sharing of all of their data. And so it gets down, and you're showing everything that you have from a business standpoint to your peers. And that is an intensely motivating position to be in.
How many people are in those enterprise groups?
I knew you were going to ask that question. I think we're at 65. One of our coaches who's probably listening can plug that number into the comments if they want. But I think we're at 65 at this point. So it's growing significantly, and all of the individual franchise store owners that are working with our new owner coach team are always, it's 75, by the way. I just got a text from Amy Moore, our Director of Retail Ops. All of the new franchisees, whether they're a transfer, so they bought an existing store, or brand new, are coached through that first year of their operations with the goal of graduating out of the new owner team and into the enterprise coaching. So we intend and expect to see great growth in that enterprise coaching group.
Perfect. So David, I think that Mike just put your slides up if you'd like to start talking, and I think this goes to how you're sharing the data with your system.
Yes, and all of our data we share, it is live. And I'll tell you what, we had some real trepidation when we first started on whether or not we should do this. Part of it came from a real need. We have some great franchises. The vast majority of our franchises are very good and do very well with us. One of the challenges we had is many of the more local franchises would be the struggling people. And if we weren't careful, and what happened in many of our what we call ad councils within a city is the ones that are doing the best kept quiet. And the ones doing the worst made it sound like nobody's doing anything. And so we started by sharing just the lead data on where the leads came from, and because we got complaints of people saying they didn't get their share of leads. And from that, we went to where we started showing real performance data on how they're performing on the leads, because we had franchises complaining about leads and how bad the leads were and how bad the advertising was. And when one guy's complaining because he's buying 1 out of 100 leads, and everybody else in the council is buying 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, it suddenly his complaints go away. And so this is the chart that a local ad council sees. They see all the franchises. Now, we can't see them all. They scroll down, but it sees every lead, how many leads they got. It shows how many purchase contracts they got, how many closings they have to get, what their average cost, so how much advertising it took them to buy the accounts, how many sales contracts they got, how many sales closings they did, and the average sales price, so they can compare if they're selling the same price as everybody else, and the actual gross revenue. Now, this isn't net, but the gross revenue and average gross revenue per transaction that we have. And literally, we go through and show every bit of data real time on every, they can see everybody in their ad council. So the next one, if I can go there, let's see if I can turn it. Yeah. Okay, I think you got it. They spread it to where it shows all of it there. So that's kind of the same chart that we had. Then we also have a chart. We'll go back one. That's too many here. Then we track and have an internal CRM to actually track the status of every lead, that they can see their internal leads. Now, what we show here is our summary report that we show, and this is all the leads that came in and how many came in. I think it lasts 2 weeks or something. It shows the system-wide results of them. How many? The top one is just the status of all the leads. The bottom one is the actual results of those leads, from how many they actually contacted to how many appointments they went on, to down to the contracts that they had. And I'm going to show you what it looks like from a franchise viewpoint. This shows the same chart, but in percentages, so they can see what the actual percentages are. Last one is what I believe I have what a franchise sees. So they can see how many, the actual status of every lead they have, and the actual results of all those leads. So this franchise has gotten 139 leads that have in the lead status up at the top. This shows 139. This one shows how many they got in the last 30 days, which is 86, and it shows what they did with all 86 of those leads. And I think the next one shows a percentage. Let's see if I've got that in here. Yeah, this broke down the percentage of the leads. So they had 86 leads and went down how many contacts they made. So sometimes there'll be multiple contacts. How many appointments they set to 34, which is 39%, which is right on our target. And they made 19 offers. They actually wrote 7 contracts, bought 7 houses during this period. And so what we found, as soon as we started sharing all this data, it became very apparent why those that weren't performing. And what happens is their complaints went away, and it becomes a real collaboration on how do I do better, and it's just raised our whole system-wide.
Okay, so they know what your targets are, and then so it's very easy for them to log in and see if they're below the targets in each of these metrics.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Okay, so we're going to talk about KPIs next. So I heard, David, you said you kind of eased into it as far as what you started sharing or putting out there, but how do you guys establish and establish the KPIs for the unit level data that you're collecting? And then how do you collect those targets like you have, David, to set for everybody? So that's I'm going to stay with you, David, to just finish that. So, and that's the first part, is how do you establish and then measure those targets for people? And then how do these KPIs play into your company-wide goals that you're setting? So, David, if you want to just continue that.
Yeah, I'll be happy. All of ours are based on real averages because the more we get people participating and get real average of what everybody does, that sets what their performance should be. And we don't compare people to the top people. We don't compare them to the bottom people. We do everything based on what the average person does. We show averages for first-year franchises, so new franchises basically compared to other new franchises. We compare a class. We got a group of new franchises going through training today, this week, and that class for the first year would be. We'll compare what all of them are doing with each other. And then we do the first, those who are in the second year, not by month, but over. But basically all of our numbers we use are averages system-wide and averages in a market. So then it takes away what we think they should be doing to basically what the average, what everybody else is doing.
Great. And are those played into your company-wide goals? Are you setting goals to get those averages up every year, or how are they playing into what your staff is focused on?
Yeah, we track it. Yes, it is set on goals. Every part of our goals are part of it. But the reality is, we've been, we sold our first franchise in 1996, and so the good news is we got a lot of history to go by, and so our goals are based on the real average performance that we go. The reality is, we use those for what we call regional business developers to manage their team, and what we call development agents to manage their team to make sure they're hitting at least the company averages. But as a company, it's real hard for us to move that needle a little bit on performance. But where it really impacts it is eliminating losses, because the turnover of franchises that don't perform is where we found the biggest impact we can make. If we don't have that turnover, if we can just get them managing their numbers.
Great. So Jayson, how about to you? So how did you establish, it sounds like you said when you came in they were already sharing a lot more information than you were used to. But so how do you establish what those benchmarks are for people, those targets for people to hit, and then do those play into your company-wide goals?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've been able to do is, over the years, move to what are really the important key pieces of data. One of the things that we saw was that we were sharing a lot of information. We were sharing a lot of, performance indicators, but not all of those, rose to the top of, top priority and improvement. And so one of the things we've done over time is focus on our top 10 key performance indicators, and it's really kind of a waterfall of, the overall financial process. So top line indicators such as inquiries and conversion, all the way to gross margin, and then net promoter score and client retention, all the way through to EBITDA and cash flow. And so for new franchisees, we'll establish kind of a ramp-up basis for those that's consistent with their revenue ramp-up, and then over time we'll help franchisees be able to kind of look at those goals and those metrics and evolve those relative to their overall performance. And we really, on an annual basis, calibrate those to the middle of the top, or the middle of the second quartile on our system-wide revenue performance that we publish in our item 19, to be able to make sure that those relate to kind of the upper third of performance of our franchisees overall.
Okay, so that goes back to what you said you're establishing in the very beginning, that you're a high performance culture. So you're giving them a bar that's higher than average as their target.
Correct. Exactly right. And then to the point of the kind of the company goals, we take that metric of kind of the middle of that second quartile and look at where franchisees relate to that regardless of their vintage, so that we can look at kind of one metric and hold ourselves accountable, and at least internally as a franchisor. And it's a metric we call revenue percentage to goal. So whether I've been open 5 months or 5 years as a franchisee, where I am on that timeline and revenue ramp up trajectory, I'm on a certain percentage of that. So again, because it's it's sort of a stretch goal for ourselves, we don't expect to be at 100%, but we'll look at, is that metric moving up or down as kind of a single barometer of the overall health of the system. And then one of the things that does for our franchisees is allows us to use that in correlation. So for example, if there's a certain program or a certain standard that we're looking to say, boy, this really makes those franchisees that do this on a consistent basis are achieving a higher than average revenue performance, we can look at that and sort of across the board. And so, are you above where you should be, at least according to that metric, regardless of how long you've been open? So it's sort of a normalizer to do those sort of correlations. So when we talk about certain aspects of the client experience, or having competency in a certain, like our BrightStar Connections dementia portfolio, it allows us to be able to bring additional credibility to our recommendations in coaching when we can show the impact and correlation to a higher than average revenue.
Great. And Paul, how about you guys?
Yeah, similar to the other panelists. I mean, we have a long history of collecting data so we can actually identify those KPIs that are really going to make a difference. Of course, we collect information that is always helpful to make a case, but really focusing, I think, on that list of information that I gathered, we have the top 9 reports, which usually individually provide one key element of strong operations. We do provide and show on some of our KPIs, especially our financial data, not only do we provide averages, but we also show the top performers, those top performing stores, because we know that that motivates the individual franchisees when they're being coached to hit those numbers. So having those push goals is very, very important. And so we break down what our expectations are system-wide for the year, and then we can drill down and say, here's how we're going to do it. This is the KPI that probably has the most mobility to, on an individual franchisee basis, that can cumulatively make a bigger difference in the overall performance of the brand. So,
great. So you're giving them an average and a stretch goal. I love it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go to incentives and rewards. Jayson, you mentioned that you celebrate those rankings when they're out there. So I'm going to have Mike throw up a poll question about how do you reward strong KPI performance. So Jayson, I want to go to you on how do you guys celebrate that, and then also do you offer incentives or rewards to franchisees that are hitting their goals?
Yeah, a great question. We celebrate it really in 3 different ways. So one is franchisees, when they hit a certain number of billable hours, that starts pretty early on. Whenever they get to that next milestone, and then on a quarterly basis, as long as they hit or move to the next milestone, they get recognized on a quarterly basis for that performance. And that comes in the shape of a system communication and list of who's hitting those hours, as well as we give the office a framed certificate that includes hitting that milestone that they can keep in their conference room and be able to celebrate that with their team. Another thing that we do is at our annual conference, we have 2 annual conferences, and we'll have awards for franchisees based on a number of different metrics, from growth to overall revenue performance to clinical program adoption to net promoter score and client satisfaction. So we reward performance in a variety of different ways that are all key indicators, but give an opportunity for celebration of just improvement in a variety of ways. And then finally, we have on an annual basis an incentive for 10 franchisees to attend a kind of luxury vacation, if you will, with our CEO and our president, called our Supernova trip. That includes, or that is invited, or the franchisees that are invited are the top 2 individual location, the top 2 multi-unit location, but then the other 6 seats, if you will, are for those that have the highest growth in revenue. And so there's an opportunity virtually in those for any franchisee on a year-to-year basis. And it's been great to be able to celebrate, maybe who's not necessarily in the top 10, quote unquote, but had a great year or had a really large improvement. Those are the types of things that really kind of set the culture on fire of what really is achievable and an extra specific benefit for that franchisee and their family, but also that visibility to the rest of our system.
Perfect. David, how about you? Are you doing anything to recognize the people that are hitting their goals or rewarding them in any way?
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff we do. We start with, we have an intranet. When they log in on their homepage that they have, the 5 key metrics that we track, their numbers for the last 30 days with them, their franchise show up right there on the front of their screen. So they can't hide from it. We also have badges that when they hit certain milestones, they get a different badge that shows up on their screen. So they're looking at, with any franchise wants to look up another phone number or find another franchisee, they go to their home screen, they see all their information, they see all their badges, and they see their key metrics, which kind of cleans up a whole lot of stuff. So we start with there. We also have a lot of different awards we give out. In fact, we got kind of criticized at our convention because people said we gave out too many awards, and I'm not sure. I think the only ones that were critical to that, those that didn't get any of them. But,
yeah. That's usually how it goes.
But otherwise, but yeah, we do a lot of recognition, a lot of awards, both. In fact, right now, you can go on our intranet in any of our awards categories. You can see the top 20 franchises in every category, and you can see who they are. And all those that are in the running track it monthly. We shut it off the last month of the year because we want some excitement to mention. So we shut off who's in the last month of the year. But up until that point, they can watch it daily.
That's great.
Very cool.
And Paul, how about you?
I'm feeling a little inadequate at this point. We
no,
we
it's opportunity, Paul. It's opportunity.
We do. Yeah, thank you. I like the way you think. We have a number of recognitions on a monthly basis in updates and in our ranking reports, so that we're identifying those top performers. We also, at our conference, the Enterprise Leadership Conference, we have a lot of presentations of the top volume stores, top most improved, top, and a number of KPIs. We also do layer in something that's unique, obviously, to Wild Birds Unlimited, but the Friend of the Environment Award, so that franchisee who has been one of the biggest givers and assisting oftentimes schools, scouts, not-for-profit organizations that are environmentally based on giving back to the community of nature lovers in which we exist, and also an annual award offered as the Franchisee Honor Award, somebody who has just consistently been really a giver, helped other franchisees, helped us with special projects. So we identified that at our annual conference, and that's a huge, big lifetime award for our franchisees, and something that means a whole lot to our franchise system. But we don't do any vacations, but now you've got me thinking.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that everyone has kind of given us a good scope of what they're doing in their systems, but you know, it is a franchise system, so the thought that everyone's going to do things the way you want them is probably a little far-fetched. So Jayson, you talked about, you use it in the development process where you talk about all this information that's being shared and how you're collecting it from them, and you use their reaction to that as part of the way that you weigh if they're a good fit for your culture. But I want to talk about when you get hesitation from new franchisees in giving you this information, anything that's not an auto pull from their systems, how do you combat that hesitation or that fear? David, you also talked about, you know, the larger ones or the ones that were doing well weren't sharing information or were more uncomfortable doing that. So how do you address that with your older seasoned franchisees that are doing well or not well? How do you get them on board with what you guys are doing and the value of it? So Jayson, if I'll go to you to start.
Sure. I think, you know, one of the things that we've found is we haven't had a lot of pushback on using the data, but when we get them on board, if I had to say it's one thing, it's really just about the credibility of the data, that they understand that that we're, you know, what we're sharing, that franchisees that, you know, that we're talking about, you know, specifically or as a group, understand how the calculations are generated if there's a calculation in it, and that franchisees are standing behind that data. So there's kind of a story, there's sort of a franchisee endorsement before we're using that. So we've learned over the years how important that is to ask permission before we're sharing that if it's not something that's sort of, you know, built in overall. So for example, if we've introduced a new program and we're talking about, even if we're looking to celebrate that, sometimes that can be, you know, that can backfire in a way if a franchisee feels or other franchisees feel that we're using that to sort of, you know, kind of, you know, push something through. So we're a lot more careful about that, and we also just make sure that if, you know, when we talk about correlations, when we talk about you know, ROI types of things, that we're really clear about publishing, you know, how we came to that conclusion, and really kind of what it means overall, so that there really isn't any concern about the data that we're using, and that there's a lot of belief in it. And when we have that trust and credibility, then then we're doing our part in the transparency and having that be good value. So we've had to learn some of that the hard way. But
so more of sharing how you got the data, or how you're interpreting it and sharing it is what you're doing better of.
Exactly. That we really just take a step back and make sure people understand that, publish kind of where that comes from, if people want to look at the data, just so that there's no feeling that we're trying to use data to to make a story that isn't necessarily true.
Got it. Paul, how about you? Have you run into any pushback from people in how you're sharing their information or what you're collecting?
Yeah, I have to say that over the years we probably have, because we are so specific about the data that we are going to collect from the beginning of the development process. Our new franchisees, they don't know any other world other than sharing this data. And so, but as I mentioned in one of those very early slides when we made this presentation about we're going to collect this, we need to collect it in a consistent and accurate fashion. We basically eased it. Rather than using a stick, we used a carrot to actually really focus on sharing the results and giving our franchisees tools to meet their goals. And so we motivated them sort of by holding the carrot out and not demanding it, not using the contractual relationship in the beginning, but really working our way up to that so that our franchisees could see what the opportunities they had if they shared that data and we had good, solid information, rather than just pushing them. And so we don't really get a bunch of pushback. Now, we do have some franchisees who are not willing to share with their peers, and they don't have to. Their information all goes into our monthly, quarterly, annual benchmarks, but it's not identified as to what their actual data is. That is a voluntary opportunity to be allowed to be in the enterprise coaching model. So we don't get a lot of pushback, but I will tell you, Jason's right that of course that there's the accuracy of the data has to be very well attended to. And so we also know, and sometimes franchisees will even tell us, I'm concerned about the accuracy of this data, and we will then eliminate that data from our benchmarking process.
Okay, great.
So.
And David, how about you? And I'm going to pause because I do want to get back to your enterprise groups in our next question too, Paul, but I want to ask more about that and who's sharing. So David, how about you on pushback that you've gotten, or you had talked about in the beginning, those bigger guys not really opting to share their information?
Well, really, we've got very little pushback at all. In fact, the only pushback we've gotten is from franchises that sometimes aren't feeling like a part of the team and almost like they're competing with others in their market instead of learning from others. And that is the only pushback at all we've got. Now, at first, as I talk about the accurate data, when we first came out with it, we do some of our data, like we're pulling from our database. And in fact, the reality is this had to make us good, because if it wasn't correct, they let us know it wasn't correct, and we had to fix it. And over a period of time, it got to where now our data that they see is very accurate, and if there ever is an issue with it, we found out about quickly, which tells us they're watching it, and we correct it. But surprisingly, and I think part of it's because we share everybody's, there hasn't been much pushback. The ones we thought might push back were some of our bigger, better franchises that are very profitable. They sometimes were almost embarrassed by their profit. They didn't want to be bragging. But since we're sharing everybody's, it kind of eliminated that as a challenge.
Perfect. So I want to leave, we have a lot of questions and I want to get to that, but I have one last question that I think it's important for you guys to all discuss because you've all alluded to the fact that sharing this information is used as a way for people to get better in their business and to strive to be better. So I want to talk about what types of programs or support you put in place for people that are not hitting those averages or those targets that you're giving them. And I think that this is going to also go into performance groups and the enterprise groups. So basically, if you guys can run through, and we can get into the conversation about the business peer groups and things like that, but if you can run into how do you identify someone that's not hitting their goals, and then what happens to help get them on track, if anything. So Paul, I'd like to start with you on that, and then we'll wrap this question up and do all of the Q&A from the audience.
I think the first thing that happens is a one-on-one conversation with the franchisee to get a better understanding of what's going on and to drill down deeper into beyond just what numbers are flowing into the franchise support center.
And is that like the first month you see them under, or are you looking for a trend? How are you? When does that alarm go off?
That alarm goes off with an existing mature franchisee if their numbers are highly variable from their region or from their age group, and we would find out. Our coaches have really good, strong relationships with most of the franchisees, so they're going to see something that's going on. I mean, they're incredible. If it's a brand new store and they're not hitting their numbers right away, of course the coach, our new owner team not only includes 2 coaches, but also someone from marketing, training, and hobby and nature education to really drill down and identify where the opportunity is.
And you mentioned you're looking at their data every 30, 60, 90 days as they ramp up anyway. So, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at their key metrics, how many, what their customer transaction is, average ticket. We can look at an expanded sales summary and find out what's going on an individual basis in the store. And then assist the owners in developing giving them additional training, advanced assistance on whatever they need, and in some cases, connecting them with another expert within the franchise support center staff. We haven't had to do it as much. We're knock on wood. We have a pretty strong franchise system in general. But when things were really tough, and especially around the Great Recession, we had a program in place, and it was named the Red Flag Program, where we were really drilling down and looking at everybody who had just issues on their balance sheet, issues with cash flow, and we developed a program that was just an additional intense operational support. And in many cases during that period of time, and sometimes now, occasionally it'll be a one-off where I would get involved in a system in trying to identify cost savings, including working with their landlords to get rent reduction. Wherever we saw there was an opportunity to stabilize the business and then give the franchisee additional training at no cost to stabilize their business so that they could build off of a stronger foundation, we would do it. And it isn't as formalized of a group right now because we don't need it, but it is, our ops team is just on top of it all the time.
They're ready. They're ready if it's needed.
They're ready. Yeah, we're ready to go, and they're ready to know. They know what to do. I mean, we have, everything. I'm sorry, I cut you off, Michelle. But just that you don't have the cash reserves to do some additional marketing. Boom! Here's a list of the top 10 no-cost, low-cost marketing efforts that are going to drive customers into your store. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at your marketing, and here's some additional assistance that we can provide. So we really just go into hyperdrive.
Perfect. David, how about you guys? When do you guys jump in, and what are you offering to the franchisees, if anything, to help get them on track?
We have, in fact, we added 6-7 years ago what we call development agent structure. Where we have, at the time, there were top franchises that we actually started paying to support other franchises and help develop a region, so to speak. And then we have internally what we call regional business developers, and they work with the development agents, and they once a month go review all the franchises they're working with, review their metrics, review what they're doing, what they're doing well, what they aren't, and kind of have a game plan on how to help and support those franchises that need it. And so we work through both a kind of field support system as well as our internal support system to give them that support.
Perfect. And then Jayson, we're going to wrap it up with you and then take some questions. So what are you doing when the people are falling below target to help get them on track?
Yeah, we do a couple things. So one is we have overall goals that franchisees and our field support team will do at an annual conference the next year. And so if we're off by about 10% on a 13-week trend, that's sort of our kind of internal trigger to have some extra coaching. So that may involve kind of our onboarding has specific coaches on operations and sales that we can get involved depending on the opportunity. Another thing that we do is we started performance groups a couple of years ago. So we have about a third of our system in performance groups right now. So sometimes those opportunities or exceptions can be best addressed by benchmarking peer-to-peer, and we're definitely seeing good results of that. And then I think that the baseline that we look at is we have a certain revenue target where all franchisees should be at in their first location at 9 months. And if we have a group of franchisees that aren't at that level, we have a specific number that we say is acceptable for a certain amount of time. But that's something that we look at as a senior leadership team on a weekly basis. And I have an accountability to that group and obviously ultimately those franchisees that we have action plans for helping them improve to kind of get off that list, if you will. So because we know statistically if it goes beyond that, their chance of success and being able to stay in the long haul decreases, and so we just can't let that happen. So those are probably the three main things that we do to help franchisees they're not hitting those targets.
Perfect. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to handle the questions, but I just want to state I really and truly believe that being in a franchise system, the benefit of that to a person that's in business on their own is access to all this information from each other. So the more collaboration you have from your development and your operations team that are supporting this type of data being collected, shared, and used to push performance, I think it's going to help everyone. So thank you guys so much, David, Paul, and Jayson, for sharing your stories. And Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to get to. We have a lot of questions here, so get at them.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and great conversation from all the panelists. So thank you, guys. We do have a lot of questions, and a lot of them are directed at you, Paul, for about the enterprise group. So I'm going to hit you with a bunch of those to get us started. I hope you don't mind. And actually,
I will do my best.
Great. And the first one actually is just a more general question for you. At what point do you give your candidates an FDD?
Oh, the FDD is the third step of our development process. So step one is usually a phone call conversation just about fit, answering general questions, getting them to fill out the qualification form and submit it. Next step is they have to do validation. We require that our franchise candidates then visit and speak with at least 3 or 4 franchisees, and mandate is that we require that they review the detailed franchise business review franchisee satisfaction survey that we do on an annual basis. Get the conversation after that, and then if at that point they're still ready to move forward and we're still ready to move forward, we will provide them the FDD. So third step in our development process.
Great, thank you. And before I ask you the next question, I see that somebody is asking me to share the results from how to reward strong performers poll, so I'm going to put that back up on the screen for a minute. So, Paul, I guess the next question that I'll get to, let's see, somebody asked, you said that there's about 75 people in the enterprise group, and they asked out of how many. So do you know what the total is or what percentage the 75 is?
I'm going to be watching my my ops person. We have 299 franchisees. About 30 of them. She's in my office and giving me real-time data. What percentage are enterprise? I love it. It's about 26%. There are some franchisees in there that have multiple units, so that number is probably a little bit underestimated. So it's probably more closer to 35%.
Great, thank you. And is there a charge for franchisees to participate in the enterprise coaching group?
Now, there's a good idea that we could implement. No, there is not. It is it's part of what they get as being a member of the Wild Birds Unlimited franchise team.
Great.
So the charge is their time. I mean, they really have to invest and commit to ongoing focus and conversations, doing a business assessment. So the cost is time.
Gotcha. No, that's great. And then a couple questions just on the coaches. Can you repeat who's on the new owner coaching team? And did you say that there were 2 coaches for new stores? And if so, is it a sales coach, or marketing, or financial, or what kind of coaches are they?
Well, our coaches are really master of all. They can hit all operational areas of expertise. So we have 2 business coaches who are in the retail operations department. The other members of that new coaching team are manager of training and leadership, and our media and, oh God, this is one of my best friends and I can't remember her title. Media and PR specialist, so somebody from the marketing department who really works with franchisees on implementing the marketing strategies that we present. And then the 5th and final member of that team is, I'm sure every franchise has a nature and hobby education department, right? That's pretty much what I always thought of franchising. But he is our hobby and training, our hobby and education manager. So giving our franchisees the selling skills and the nature education in order to really deliver that exceptional bird feeding experience in the stores.
Great, that's awesome. And then last question for you, and this I promise, unless somebody has another one that they want to send in. Does everyone in the system, even those not in the enterprise group, get to see the data that's collected?
They get all the benchmark data, but they don't get they don't do individual store sharing data. So they get all of the benchmarks on all of those KPIs. But you know, if you're in Kittery, Maine, you don't get to see the Somersworth, New Hampshire's individual data, and vice versa. But if you were both in enterprise, you would get to share that individual data.
Great, thanks. So let's get our other panelists back involved here. Another question that came in is, it seems most franchisors provide monthly reports for their franchisees. Is it common practice to do a yearly summary based on the monthly reports as well? So I'll go to Jayson and David to start this. So Jayson, do you guys do a monthly and then an annual summary, or is it just one or the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have quarterly town hall meetings where we'll share high-level versions on a kind of a quarter-to-date basis, and then in our kind of Q1 meeting, we'll share a lot of data that's been annualized. But it's probably a good idea, you know, around publishing that a lot more. So we really just kind of do it at a high level, and there's some backup, but that's probably the extent that we do on a quarterly and annualized basis.
Great, thanks. And David, what about you? Is it monthly sharing? Do you do an annual summary as well?
Well, we do. Of course, ours is pretty much online all the time. But we do an annual summary of it. Just key things we've learned, things have changed. We also do an in-depth survey of our franchises that we do right before our convention, that we give more detailed results, financial and other, to the franchises annually.
Perfect, thank you. And Paul, what about you?
We do annual reports in addition to the monthly reports. Yeah.
Great.
Basically, our monthly does a year-to-date. You know, it just keeps sharing all that information.
Right, I got you. So let me ask also, this is one that just came in to all the panelists also. David, I'll start with you. What percentage of franchisee turnover do you experience annually? And do you have any data to share, as data or suggestions, I suppose, to share for improving franchisee turnover rates?
Yes, we do. In fact, we do quite an in-depth study every year, but ours runs around 5% turnover. We do, and that includes some that sell theirs. That includes some that non-renewals, includes everything. We did, it's interesting, of ours, we eliminate those that are what we call unavoidable losses that we show that it was like we had a guy die last year. We have some major health issues. We had a military guy that was starting the business and got transferred overseas, some of those. Of the other ones, 71% of them we lose that they either buy 2 or less houses. So our losses, almost all of them, are people that just never really got started and got into it.
Perfect, thanks. Jayson, what about you?
I'm sorry, what specifically, Mike? I apologize. About sending the information for about the share on the annual basis?
What kind of loss and turnover was the question?
What kind of loss and turnover? Okay, yeah, sorry, I lost that one. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I actually just deleted the question.
Okay, sorry about
if you could just share what your turnover rate was and any suggestions that you have on improving the turnover rate.
On franchisee turnover?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I have to check our number, but I think we're at 93% continuity rate, and we really look at that in terms of really setting expectations early, in terms of having conversations on an annual basis with our franchisee on succession planning and exit planning, so that if it isn't the right fit or there's an opportunity from a financial perspective that resale might be an option. So it's certainly something that we're about of what are the different options for franchisees, be it expansion, being it resale, being it investing or moving to additional brands that we have under BrightStar, and really just stay proactive in the plans that goes around that. It's one of the things that we ask in our client or our franchisee satisfaction surveys, to kind of get a sense either specifically or generally what franchisees think about in terms of expansion and any hesitation that they would have on that. So that gives us an additional sense of that as well.
Perfect, thank you. And Paul, if I come to you, I just want to shout out that we do have a feedback survey that we're going to ask everybody to do just for 30 seconds as we wrap up our webinar today. So look for that link in your chat right now. And so, Paul, what is your turnover rate, and what recommendations can you make as far as cutting that down a little?
Yep. Just running the quick numbers over the last 2 years. So you're talking about this, I think there needs to be a shift in thought process in franchising, especially as franchisors get older, because some of the, and I'm not, the way the question was asked, it lumps together transfers or resales and a total loss or termination of the franchise. And I think those are two very, very different things and should be looked at very differently, because in our brand, a transfer or resale is oftentimes a celebration. I mean, last year we had 11 transfers. Well, in one of those cases, it was one of the highest prices ever paid for a backyard bird feeding store that we could track in our history. So we have a franchisee who has built this unbelievably strong business and sold it for a lot of money. And so that's a great thing. So we had a 7%, 11 out of our 200 and at the end of the year 82 stores franchise sold to a new buyer. Of course, in that group, there were 1 or 2 that were struggling that have now turned around with new ownership. new capital, new an invigorated staff and team. And we lost points. We lost 2 out of our 282 stores that just closed. In one case, just end of the lease, retirement. And in another case, it was just a sad situation that was uncontrollable. That being said, I think that turnover number, there needs to be a paradigm shift in the way we talk about that in franchising, because I do think that lumping resales in with a closure or termination is not the right way to look at it, especially as the brands get older.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that's actually all the questions that we have. We got through them pretty quickly, and so I thank you guys all for that. And more importantly, I thank you for your time today and a great conversation, and probably more data and facts that people know what to do with, or at least I hope so. So thank you all. Thanks, Michelle, for leading the discussion. On your screen is our next webinar, which takes place on Thursday. And so we hope to see you all back there. If you have a chance, please complete that feedback survey. And thanks again to our panelists.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Bye, guys.